Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is May 31, 2025. I want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. Please subscribe. Also want to thank Richard Benjamin for introducing me to today's guest, David J. Loftus. Where are you calling in from?
Portland, Oregon.
How cool is that? First question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
The best thing for a human being, I would say being alert to what's going on around you.
Oh, I like that. Being alert. That is a great word. I don't get that word that often.
I'm surprised.
Being alert. I mean, being present is good, but alert is that higher level that I'm always striving for and hoping others are striving for. So what is your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Wow. Favorite form of information, I think, is just referral by friends, whether it's
Yeah.
in person or online or in a letter or email. I I do not pay attention to the news because a lot of it is persiflage and advertising and scare stories and so it's like books. I don't tend to read books. It's very rare I pick up a book the first time I've heard of it. I wait till I've heard of it several times from different sources quite often, and then I decide, okay, this is worth checking out. And it's the same with news.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Okay. So why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Well, that's how you get a better sense of who you are, what you think, where you want to go next. All that information you kind of put together to decide what am I doing here? What do I want to do? It's how you make sense of the world and of yourself.
Yeah. Do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
I think it's innate.
Yeah.
But we have instinctual responses to incoming information that may be fear, attraction, lust, whatever, and then we want to process. Am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? How do I want to act on this information? So there are instinctual things that are definitely innate, and then trying to make sense of them is maybe just a slight step away. But again, it's something that we do naturally, at least to some extent. Some people seem to shut it off.
Right. Well, I appreciate it. You're articulate and concise, and we're here to have fun. This is great. Do thoughts create emotions?
Certainly they do, and vice versa. They
Yeah.
they they interplay.
Yeah. Well, fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I.
Have worked on it a while and often written. A lot of people, as I said, know me as a singer, an actor, all that other stuff, but I could do without almost all that. I write in order to understand myself and the world around me. And I often don't know what I think until I've written about it, written around it. I'll write things and I say, nah, I don't believe that. And then I've looked at it for a while and say, well, actually, there is something to that. And I find I write to an audience, whether it's one person or a projected sense of audience, because then I have to go further than I would if I was just kind of doodling around with the thought myself. I have to make sure it makes sense and it's coherent and that the other person will get it. And that's how I get it.
Really good. You're really covering a lot of the ground we're going to get deeper into. Thank you, David. So that's funny because McLuhan said, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it.
Mm-hmm.
Can humans think without language?
Sorry, run that by me again.
Can humans think without language?
Wow, that's a tough one. My instinct or my inclination is to say no.
Yeah.
Because language, I think, is part of the process of stepping away from the situation, the perception that's right in front of you, and to which you tend to respond instinctually with an emotion such as fear, attraction, all those kind of instant emotional responses. And converting what you're seeing or thinking or I should say feeling, seeing or feeling into language is that first step away from those sensations so that you can then, I think the question was, think about what to make of them as well as what to do about them.
Yeah. It's really good, David. You sussed it out because most people go, can humans think without language? They go, yes. But it's really like, no, it's deeper because Chomsky says language is not just words, it's culture, tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
Well, it depends on the situation. I mean, if I'm just looking at phenomena and events and it doesn't implicate me instantly, immediately, and seem to require action, I let it go. I just let it sit. I give it time.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I have to admit, look for fights. I go out of my way to have disagreements and arguments with people online and sometimes in person as part of a way of, again, not just correcting others, but also to understand myself and where I am better. Remind me the question now. I'm working toward it.
It is, what do you do when language breaks down, like communication breakdown?
Yeah. So if I'm trying to convey my thoughts or at least theories to another person that does not seem to be acknowledging or let alone grasping and responding directly to me, I don't mind. I've been in that situation many, many, many times. And so it's entirely up to me whether to continue working at it because I'm getting more out of it by thinking around it and trying different strategies, or walk away. And so I have a lot of experience debating with brick walls because, again, I benefit. People, friends, and opponents have told me, "Why are you doing this? You're never going to change their mind." And my position is, I never thought I was going to change anybody's mind. I'd be naive to think that. There is a whole list of good reasons to engage, even with total brick walls. Starting with, I understand myself better. I identify my blind spots. I see where I need to do more homework and more research. I am providing aid and support to allies. I am providing food for thought for the fence sitters, the people who are confused and bewildered. Way, way down the list is the underlying message to my direct opponent is, shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. But you can't say that out loud because
that's the beauty.
They think they're getting to you. So basically, although it takes a lot of time, I have to decide whether I have the wherewithal and the time and the energy. I make things so uncomfortable for them that they freely walk away. And maybe even shut the fuck up the next time they're tempted to speak out, at least within my hearing online, but possible. And if people are patient and persistent enough from the other side, we find something to agree on. We find common ground, and they say, you got a point there.
Yeah.
And some of them become Facebook friends. I certainly pick up more Facebook friends and followers from their friends who are seeing what's going on. So, there's a lot of benefit for me, quite apart from the stupid idea that I'm going to change anybody's mind.
That's engagement. I love it. And it's a great attitude. It kind of reminded me of Sam Goldwyn said, as for my critics, don't even ignore them.
A lot of actors and writers, A, don't look at their work after it's finished, and B, don't look at the reviews.
Yeah.
and I've had very few reviews of my writing, formal reviews in print, but I look at them all, and I like to look at my past acting work, video clips of my past acting work and my writing, and I don't get uncomfortable. I don't know why so many people can't handle it or say they can't handle it and get uncomfortable, because I just look at it and I think, yeah, I could have done that better. Oh, that was nice.
Yeah.
I don't think I really got it there, but it's past, it's done. Let it go.
Yep.
Look upon it as if you're someone else, because you are.
Yep. Your observations of humans in general, are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
Well, we're more feeling beings, period, in general, because that's an essence. Thinking is work. It's something you have to choose to do.
Yeah.
You can't choose not to be a feeling being. So at ground level, we are feeling beings in general. And then from person to person, some are more feeling, some are not necessarily more thinking, but they make more of an effort to get to that point on a regular basis or occasionally, or, it varies from person to person.
Bridget Bardot says, when I make love, I don't think. And I'm like, yeah, good luck. How do you turn your brain off? And like people who meditate go, now think about not thinking. And there's a bumper sticker on a car in my street. It says, don't believe everything you think. And I say, well, you could say, don't believe everything you feel.
Or don't believe it, or don't accept everything you believe.
That's it.
I like to say, I believe everything or nothing.
Yeah.
But what was Bordeaux's line? I don't think.
When I make love, I don't think. Like, how do you turn?
Those occasions are so rare and so vivid that it's hard for me to really say whether I agree with her or not. I would tend to agree with her, because
Yeah.
the ideal, I think, in making love, and in a lot of other human activities that matter, is not to think, but to be totally focused on what's coming in, what's happening, what you're feeling, now. That's part of why I like acting, because I'm a perfectionist and an introvert, and in a lot of situations I want to try to suss out everything that could possibly happen before I take my first step, so I'm in control. And you cannot do that in
No.
not on video, and certainly on stage. You have to throw yourself out there and you go with your gut. And that's really refreshing. It forces me not to be myself, not just as a character, but not to be the David Loftus that I like to be in most active situations. And there's a part of me that I don't know how true this is, but I have this theory that I like to act because it enables me to escape from my own mortality, even so briefly, because most of my life I was terrified and angry and frustrated and absolutely objected to the fact that I'm going to die someday. But acting, I get to be somebody. I stop being myself. That flow of who I am and what do I need and how am I feeling, it goes away because I'm being somebody else. And it's so lovely to do that.
Well, the first review of films screenings 130 years ago in Paris, in the newspaper, it said, now we'll never die. So that was an amazing comment to, describe this new contraption. But you also reminded me of Wyndham Lewis saying, artists live in the present, just be here now, live in the moment, and write a detailed history of the future.
Wow.
That's
beautiful.
That is so heavy. Okay, so here's two from Alan Turing in the 50s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
Well, no, I don't believe in the soul. So, to me, the framing is all wrong on that question. I can't parse that, because
that's all right.
Ask me, what does God want, or what's God plan for us? That's totally out of my frame of reference.
No worries. The second Turing question is, can machines think?
I would say no,
Yeah.
because you have to feel before you can think. I
Yeah.
believe, certainly in human terms, certainly in my experience, feelings precede and drive thought.
Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Wow, that's a tough one. I really don't know. Those are both vital.
Yeah.
Um, but if you put a gun to my head, I would say meaning,
Yeah.
because I can remember. I'll never forget a brief conversation I had with my girlfriend in my early 20s when we had a black cat who lived with us, and he stretched himself out lying on the rug in the sunshine, and she says, "Wouldn't it be lovely to be a cat and not have any worries?" And I said, "No, I would rather worry, because I know who I am. I know where I know where I have a better sense of where I am. I want, as much as I hate the knowledge of my mortality, it is essential to
Yeah.
establishing who I am, where I am, and what I got to do."
Yeah.
So,
No,
yeah, I'd
I
rather be unhappy and have a sense that I've got a grasp of at least part of the meaning. I
yeah.
think, yeah, I'm going
Yeah,
with
David,
you on
I
that one.
I want you to feel comfortable saying, "I don't know," or "I can't answer that," and you
Yeah,
did. In
but
in in, basically, I'm for tangents, stories, anecdotes. In other words, you don't have to answer the question like Rebecca Solnit says so well. If you ask me a question, doesn't mean I have to answer it.
yeah,
These are just prompts to talk, but this is really fun. And so I got that question from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And
mhm.
I'm curious your thought on this. He says, happiness doesn't tend to last, meaning tends to last.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You can build on meaning, you cannot build on happiness, which is tends to be transitory. It can even be dependent on illusion and delusion.
Yeah.
Can I interject very briefly here? I wanted to let you know that you're catching me at a strange time in my life, because I normally look like this.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I looked like this 2 months ago. I will look like this again at the end of July. But because of the timing, the scheduling of our interview, you caught me at a time when I'm growing out my hair and I'm growing out my face for a Shakespeare role I'm going to do in mid-July. So that's why I
Beautiful.
look like this.
I love it. I love your picture showed up so well too. So there's many looks. So does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
You mean from our own point of view?
Yeah, it's interesting. The wording on that question is, does the brain more detect or create? And then when I elaborate, I says, do we? So you put it in the context you want. Is it sort of is consciousness there or do we create it? Do we detect it or do we create it?
I don't think that's a question that any of us is capable of answering.
Yeah.
I read a fabulous book, well, an interesting book, um, last fall by a Stanford neuro researcher called Determined.
Oh, yeah, I know him.
And
I haven't read him, but I know about him. Yeah.
and I think from my own perspective, although there's lots of fascinating discussion in the book about philosophy of mind and consciousness, and really eye-opening discussion of various studies that people have conducted in his field and neighboring fields, I still think personally that he missed the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
He's got an admirable goal of trying to remove culpability and blame that so many people want to lay on other people, not understanding very well where they're coming from or how they're hobbled or even put together. But uh, one of these days, maybe I'll get around to writing my essay about how I think he missed the boat on it. Your question again was, does
Uh,
consciousness create or
detect.
It's
No, do we
yeah,
more
and I don't think
or
that's a question that any of us can answer because
yeah,
it's like asking a fish,
yeah,
what is the nature of water? We are so totally
yeah,
in the middle of it
yeah.
that or asking a ladle, "What do you do?"
That well, that's McLuhan's biggest one of his biggest aphorism is a fish don't know they're in water until you take them out of it. We don't know we've been in electricity our whole lives,
Mhm,
but that's a hidden ground. But
mhm.
we anyways,
And
the
that we
this
have electricity inside us.
right, and then how do you define it? But the book determined Sapolsky, is he basically no free will? We have no free will. Is that what
Well,
is he
he's
kind of
slowly
saying?
reached that point, and he admits a couple of times in the book, "I'm prey to this illusion or delusion myself.
Yeah,
Not sure whether we're getting there, but that's his ideal goal." And
that's
yeah,
yeah,
he's trying to say there is no such thing as free will. He's trying to
yeah,
make a case for that
yeah.
position. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, there's no way to put it bluntly. There's no way for anyone to have predicted he would write that book. So
yeah,
right there,
yeah,
you're saying he chose out of his free will to
yeah,
attack his subject in this manner.
yeah. It's again this great McLuhan aspiration of understanding is having no point of view. If you want to get the big picture, like you do, you want to talk to the people who believe this and talk to people who believe that, and then you waver and you see, like Pascal said, if you want to understand anything, you have to know this end of the spectrum and that and everything in between. So
Yeah.
Marshall called it suspended judgment, like you suspend judgment, but right there there is some, it's called determinism, it's called causality. It's a lot of what we're going to get deeper into. What's faster, David, the speed of light or speed of thought?
Again, I don't think that's a question we can answer quantitatively.
Yeah,
There's a subjective element there at which we value one and the other. And to try to measure them against each other, it's like an immensely apples and oranges proposition.
metaphorically, your hunch, what is faster, light or thought?
Well, metaphorically, I would say thought because that's what matters to us. Who gives a shit what the speed of light is?
I like that because if you said thought right off the bat, I usually go, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right. Because
Thank you.
I want people to say thought. The other thing McLuhan said that's funny is that all words are metaphoric. They're, all words are metaphorical.
Oh, yeah.
Then what is literal a metaphor for?
Literal is also a metaphor for a value that we are imposing on phenomena.
Exactly. Really good. See, you
One
answered
thing
that.
I used to do when you remember in the days of Usenet in the mid-90s when we were all just text only before
Yeah.
the World Wide Web and graphics became easy to handle. One of the
Yeah.
things I used to have fun doing on Usenet was to say, everything is storytelling. Science is storytelling.
Yeah.
What you want to call objective and factual and numerically groundly based is still a story because we're
Yeah.
defining it all in terms that matter to us. Who's to say, the old tree falling in the forest question, whether the tree and the ground are attracted to each other or the tree is attracted to the ground in an emotional sense? One could tell that story, and it depends on who's telling it and who cares about the story,
Yeah.
what value to assign to it.
Yeah.
And some people would go nuts. No, science is real. It's factual. It's different from literature and all other kinds of storytelling. Well, in some ways, yes, but I don't know about that because again, we're defining all the terms.
Dude, you're like setting up, you know how they have those outlines? Boom, boom, boom. You're like setting up the outline for the entire like 8-part net series we should have together. It's really good because I wanted to go off on a tangent there, but I'm going to stay with the script because we'll get there someday. So this is Audre Lorde, the poet. You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Her colleague, Yvonne Rainer, said, oh, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest? And just a hint, I'm not implying it has to be a tangible tool.
Yeah. Oh, well, I tend to side with the second person because to some extent we have no choice but to use the master's tools.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking about laws under the US Constitution, and that's the one that comes immediately to mind.
Yeah.
It's what Lord said is another way of saying you can't fight City Hall.
Yeah.
Certainly when you work for City Hall, but to some extent you have to. If you're going to say this is not acceptable, we got to have change. We're not doing everything we say we're doing. We're not doing everything we should. Therefore, I guess I got to do this very small thing, even if it is in vain, even if it doesn't go anywhere, because it matters to me, because it expresses my values. And you got to use the master's tools to some extent because you don't have any other. Now
it's funny because David, really quick, that's what Frank Zappa taught me, studying him for 6 decades. If you want to change things, you got to work within the system. And of all people, he seemed to be this fringe guy who did it all on his own, but he worked within the system to the point where at one point he says, I'm a devout capitalist.
Well,
so anyways,
I had a lot of friends who said they're getting out of Facebook because of Zuckerberg. And my mother, I don't know how well she keeps to this, but my mother insists she is not going to buy a single damn thing from Amazon because she despises it. And, you know, I'm saying, you know, that kind of purity is great if you want to make those choices, but I'm not going to make those choices because Facebook is how I connected with a lot of people.
How you connect. Yeah, that's my
Benjamin to you to
like my friend said, Facebook's controlled by the CIA. And I goes, dude, when we were fighting the government, we were protesting the government in the 60s, we used mimeograph machines. They controlled that too. You use their tools. But see, you're a good listener because very rarely people see, I open some of these questions with cute quotes. Really, all it is it's me and you versus the wording on the question. A lot of people don't listen to the quote, and that's fine because I'm just after what tool do you gravitate towards? And then you can apply the word new if you want. And then you can apply it to dismantling the master's house. But rarely people, because I sneak that Yvonne Rainer line is, no, you can dismantle the master's house if you expose the tools. So then the yes men make fun and put out a fake New York Times, and you know, I like them. I think culture jamming's good, or even Colbert or anybody who's making fun. I think you're just empowering them, showing that their tools work really good. It doesn't matter if it's hoiking up our point of view and saying, look, think it ain't illegal yet.
And to make a meta point about the last 2 minutes of exchange between us, you cannot understand the tools and you certainly cannot affect change if you don't listen.
If you don't listen.
I guess this goes back to your very first question, asking me what's important. Be alert.
Be alert.
You can't be paying attention to what you're about to say or what you value or what you think is important to get across the other side. Unless you listen to what's coming at you first and at least try to evaluate if there's any sense in it. Because what I see all the time on social media is people looking for the first thing they can jump on, focus on, and go galloping off on a tangent instead of looking for what is the essence of what this I disagree with. What's at the center of it? You know, and I do a lot of the grabbing and galloping and making use. I know that,
Yeah.
but at least I try to be aware of when I'm doing that and when it might be useful to pay closer attention to what's going on with that person and his or her argument.
Well, David, I would say your answer is, what new tool do you suggest? Listening to the and getting the essence and critical thinking.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, now the flip is, what new toy do you suggest? Because I kept asking people this tool question, and if a guy goes, well, what about a toy? And so now I go, what toy do you gravitate towards?
Of the master's tools?
Well, again, it's you put in the context you want.
Okay,
So
okay.
it comes out of that previous question, but
Yeah.
it's sort of like,
Well, I'll expand it to the biggest one. The best tool, and it's not that new, but it's not used quite enough or well when it is used, is humor.
oh, humor is your tool. Yeah.
Because a lot of people are attacking the current administration with humor, but very often very, very poorly. Uh,
Yeah.
the underlying reason and logic is bad. The shots are cheap
Yeah.
and kind of miss the point.
Yeah.
Um, they're easy. They're from the leftist point of view, they're as weak and as stupid as some of the stuff that Trump supporters and MAGA heads are tossing out there,
Yeah.
or Russian trolls.
Like, I always say, don't turn into your enemy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't,
So
but you're
humor
saying,
is, I
yeah,
remember when I was finishing up college, a member of parliament, Marilyn Waring, who had traveled, was in the middle of traveling a route from classical voice study in college to economic history, and wrote a number of books about global economics and how they leave out women, their contribution, and so on. But Phyllis Schlafly was coming to campus, and
oh yeah,
all the youthful leftists were really up in arms, and they were getting angry and tense. And she's saying, "Don't do that, because that just gives her more attention and power. You got to
exactly.
wrest the power and the attention away with her, and the best way to do that is humor. Dress up like an angel and carry a sign that say God is a butch lesbian or something like that." And I thought, wow, that's great.
Well, David, you're the best is, let them stick their own foot in their own mouth.
Yeah,
Don't force it on them. Trick them to do it. They'll reveal their weakness if you can set it up right. But that's good. So your tool was like more like listening, and then your toy was more like humor, but you actually put in the context of a
well,
tool.
plus, when the
Yeah.
humor is well, aside from if and when the humor is pointed and rational and sharp and to the point,
Yeah.
it's also more fun. It
Yeah.
reduces your own stress
Yeah.
to enjoy the process instead of getting all worked up and anxious and angry and stressed.
Yeah.
So it's part
That's
of it's partly self-care.
self-care is great. That's a great word. And it's my friend said it so well. When you're laughing, you're learning.
Maybe. Maybe. Like I
But
said, there's a lot of cheap and stupid humor out there that people are laughing at, and they're not learning anything, I don't think.
right.
They're just reaffirming their own prejudices.
Okay. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Almost nothing. Hardly ever.
That's good.
I do find that if it's been my experience that, if I engage in online firefights just before I go to bed, I don't sleep as well. So I
Yeah.
try to put a stop to that, if not before 6, certainly before 8.
Yeah.
And I do other things that are more fulfilling, like my pleasure reading, or
Yeah.
I'm usually not much good for writing, but posting to friends on Facebook or social
Yeah.
media kind of brings me in for a gentler landing. So I sleep well, because a couple of times, this was a few years back, I got so invested and embroiled in social media firefights that I could not sleep. I kept continuing the argument in my head, so I couldn't sleep, or I woke up in the wee hours in the morning and couldn't get back to sleep, and I had to go to my laptop and kind of cleanse off all those thoughts so that I could let them lie or possibly use them later. So that's one piece of self-care I try to maintain. But most of the time, I do not have trouble sleeping. And that's my heart goes out to various women in my life who have had much more difficulty getting regular sleep and sleep patterns. I've had a number of girlfriends and my spouse now who, if there was one thing I could give them, that would be it. The ability to have a nice,
Yeah.
regular sleep pattern and full rest every night because 99.999% of the time I do.
It's good. Beautiful. McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. Writers,
Oh, yeah.
musicians, poets. They're the antennas of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions.
Mhm.
So we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, David, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Well, I'm kind of a couch Marxist, I like to say. I've never really read Marx in depth or in an organized way, but
Yeah,
a lot of what I see and perceive and make judgments about in our society comes down to economic forces. So there must be a little bit of Marxism in the mix. And my response to this question is why we don't is because we live in a corporate consumer culture where there are
yeah,
lots and lots of forces that are discouraging us from taking mere entertainment with art at the high end of that seriously because
yeah,
it doesn't generate value, it doesn't generate income, it doesn't make you money. It's a distraction from what really matters. And they're giving us this message because they want to sell us shit we don't need.
yeah. It's really good. Do artists have moral obligation?
I don't think anybody has moral obligation. You accept it, you choose it, uh, and I admire artists who pick it up and who accept and choose to exercise moral obligation and try to do it as best they can. I admire those people in any kind of creative endeavor, but I don't think there's obligation. No, I'm
So, and David, listen to this. Most people, I say, do artists have moral obligation? They go, we all have moral obligation. But in essence, you sussed it out deeper. You did say, I appreciate people who
Mhm.
have a moral obligation, but that's what, to me, great art should fuck your shit up and make you say, I can do that. I mean, so, and it's not all, but art can coddle you and make you feel good and warm and cuddly, but
Mhm.
it should shake you out of your reality tunnel and go, what the heck? Or, not should, it can.
It
So
can.
yeah, and
Yeah,
that's the thing.
because it may be a step too far to say I'm doing this out of my moral
Right,
obligation
right.
because it could be so badly misread and misused.
Yeah,
But yes, I value that very much in
yeah.
any kind of artist, but I don't think you have an obligation. Nobody has an obligation to do anything except take care of himself
Right. And that's the other.
and those he or she loves.
Yeah, and be kind. That's the other thing. Most people go, "Oh, they have a moral obligation to their self." But even then, you might not reach this epiphany unless you have the balls to shake things up and go, "What if I did think
Yeah.
this?" You
Eh,
know.
because so much of the pressure on you from society is to let go of your
Yeah,
moral obligation themselves and serve their interests.
yeah,
And so making an honest assessment of your perceptions and needs and what you think you have to do in the world may lead you to say, okay, I got to fuck things up big
yeah,
time.
Yeah.
but there's no inherent value in the fucking things up.
No. It's just a McLuhan called it, artists are anti-environmental. He's not saying against Mother Nature. He's saying they're trying to shift you out of thinking, oh, I'm going to this Shakespeare play and it's supposed to teach me this. And it's like no, maybe he's trying to reveal something other than what all the Shakespeare experts told me.
It's anti-environmental in the sense of not accepting everything you're being told and even think you're seeing.
Exactly. It's being a critical thinker. It's keeping your eyes, he countered it by going, you mean my whole fallacy's wrong? That is a great line. Woody Allen made him say that line in Annie Hall
Uh-huh.
as a statement. His whole philosophy was inventing new questions and new metaphors. So he would always say that statement, do you mean my whole fallacy is wrong? And that's like Woody's exposing him to the world backwards, and he made him say it. And that's funny because it also invokes another great McLuhanism. A half a truth is still a lot of a truth.
And as I said earlier, I believe everything or I believe nothing.
Nothing. Exactly.
There was a fellow named Edward Dahlberg who was self-labeled the most hated man in American letters. He was active in the 30s, 40s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. His most famous book, I think, is called Because I Was Flesh. And it's a portrait of mainly his mother and himself, his relationship with them. But he was a class A1 curmudgeon. And one of his lines, which I was pleased to pass this along to Harlan Ellison. Harlan had never heard it before and was very pleased with it. Dahlberg said, doubt was my rock of St. Peter.
Wow, that is good.
And certainty, moral or any other kind, is extremely dangerous.
Doubt was my rock.
And so doubt was my rock of St. Peter.
Of St. Peter, thank you. So, yeah.
And certainty of any kind, whether it's moral or any other kind, can be extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
And one of the things that our corporate consumer culture, I think, tries to impose on us is both insecurity so that we grab for things they want to sell to us, whether they're ideas or products, but also the illusion that we now have certainty as soon as we have this thing that they've been trying to thrust at us.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people really need to learn how to say, I don't know.
Exactly.
Instead of, because so many of us, and I see this all the time on social media, we're afraid to be caught without an answer. And so we'll grab for the first explanation or answer about breaking news or about some phenomenon or other that we have, so that we won't be caught with our pants down without an opinion, which we can throw back, even if we haven't thought about it, we haven't weighed it, we haven't looked at its value and compared it against other information. And there's a tremendous intellectual honesty and freedom in saying, I don't know. I don't think we have enough data. It's too soon to say. It's not clear that that's what's going on here. I'm not sure I'm willing to accept that yet. And boy, there's nothing wrong with that. Because if you're honest with yourself, you can look back and see examples in history and examples in your own life where you were sure you knew what was going on and you found out later you were totally wrong.
Yeah.
So reserve judgment. Stand back. Say, gee, I don't know.
There's a line, grounds for further research, or when you really evoked the advertisers saying, create the disease and offer the cure. But
Yeah.
that's, and advertising came out of the symbolist poetry, Mallarmé, and he nailed what you said. He said, to define is to kill, to suggest is to create,
Yeah.
So really good. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I'm not terribly afraid of either.
Yeah.
It- um, new ideas or old ideas? I guess I would say I'm more afraid of old ideas only because they tend to have a stronger grip on many of us.
Yeah.
But as for inherent value, whatever the
Yeah.
hell that is, I don't see a big difference between new ideas and old ideas as far as the potential threat.
Yeah. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
That's funny. The short answer is I can't. Um, most of my early memories are tied to things I heard my parents or someone else say about me or about things that we did together, or they're tied to photos that I have that I could refer to.
Yeah.
And I'm always amazed when people can tell me memories they had of things that happened at 4, 3, 2, or Ray Bradbury, who famously said he remembered being born.
Yeah.
He described it. And for me, it's like my life did not start until kindergarten or first grade. Suddenly, I had organization, I had relationships beyond my family, of course, uh, around which to build
Yeah.
memories and ideas and thoughts. I do not remember very much before the age of 5 that I can say, this is mine and mine alone. I know I saw this or felt this or experienced this. And frankly, I don't think it matters that much.
No. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Oh, well, it depends on the person and it depends on the time of life you're in, because the older you get, some people have described memories as a curse, but boy, I find them a blessing. I
Yeah.
love them. I'm writing 2 different memoirs on my laptop just for the fun of it, to see where they go, playing with the memories and playing with the ideas and how to frame them and how to interpret them, and it's fun. I don't know whether either will ever lead to an actual published book of any kind, but I find the activity immensely interesting and fascinating and satisfying. Yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah. Tell me someone within your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you, and what specifically was that impact? Kind of like a role model.
That would be my grandmother, my
What
father's mother, Dorothy
would you,
Loftus.
yeah, what'd you mainly get from her?
Wow, there are a number of things. I would say, although there were other people in my life, including my mom and one of her teacher colleagues who gave me lots of books and really instilled a love of the written word and of reading. My mom and less often my dad read aloud to me long before I was verbal and continued for quite a long time after that. More than anyone else, my grandmother Dorothy Loftus instilled a love of books and reading because she was a voracious reader. She had a huge personal library, which she had collected mostly in frontier Fairbanks, Alaska, in the
Wow.
20s and 30s and 40s, and until she and her husband retired out to Coos Bay, Oregon. And kind of through my father, a love of music as well, because she was a pianist. She played piano for the silent pictures in Fairbanks before sound came in.
Wow.
And her oldest son, my dad, became a pianist and then a professional musician and piano teacher and choral teacher. And so his idea of babysitting was to put me on my blanket under the grand piano while he practiced Chopin and Liszt and Beethoven. And so I'm extremely sensitive and attuned to music. And we lived next door to my grandmother in my teens from age 12 to 18. So I had constant, rich exposure to her and to books. And I started reading. She broke her hip on the dance floor. She fell and broke her hip on the dance floor when I was 13 or 14 and was laid up for a number of months after having a steel ball and socket joint being laid in. So I started reading her the news, first news items from the paper and from Newsweek and Time, and then eventually moved on to books. And I'd wander over to her house. And so the first book I read to her was David Niven's autobiography, The Moon's a Balloon, and then Frank Capra's autobiography, The Name Above the Title. And
Wow.
then sophomore year of high school, my teacher required Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes, which I just blew my mind. I loved it. And I went home and read it aloud to my grandmother. I even read her lots of Harlan Ellison stories when I discovered him, including stories about Jack the Ripper and about fairly explicit sex and violence. And she never blinked an eye. She was cool. She was an old style Roosevelt liberal, and her husband was a virulent anti-communist Republican. They always cancel each other's votes out. My grandfather hated Roosevelt. He felt that that Roosevelt had filled the government with communists, and so they were a very interesting couple. But
Wow.
I would say my grandmother, Dorothy Roth Loftus, was the closest person and most influential person outside of my immediate family and my parents.
Yeah. Well, that's the next question. Outside your immediate family, having her included in immediate family, the same question. Someone outside your immediate family who had an impact on you, and what was that impact?
Well, if you're lucky, everybody has a couple of teachers along the way
Yeah.
in elementary and high school and college. Um, and there were two teachers in high school. My two favorite teachers were both English teachers, one who was also the speech tournament forensics coach, and the other was my sophomore honors English teacher who imposed a regimen of writing deductive essays.
Wow.
Um, so we had to write deductive essays, which he heavily graded, and he always gave me high grades. And he told me I was writing college level essays as a high school sophomore. And when I got in an argument with a classmate about World War II trivia, he organized a trivia bowl where I went head to head, one on one with this other guy and creamed him. But and I went back and visited both of those teachers after I'd left for college and later. And I found that the one that I was closest to in high school, who was my forensics coach and that I went out of town on speech tournaments with, had a more of a standoffish. I got more of a standoffish feel from him after I got out of high school, whereas the one who seemed more formal and observant of the walls welcomed me in a lot more. He would put Carlo Rossi wine with spice on the stove, and we would have hot spiced wine every time I went home for holidays, and visit about all kinds of things. But they were both, I came to understand, rather sad men. I felt my heart go out to them, that they were unfulfilled and sad, and I felt like it was a good thing that I went back and confirmed to them that they mattered to me, because
Wow.
that doesn't happen to a lot of teachers. Not a lot of students do that. They look back fondly on them. They talk fondly of their teachers, but they don't actually make an effort to connect with them. I don't think that's the impression I get.
That's you're so articulate and concise, David. I really appreciate this. And I gotta insert this question. You seem to be a positive person and an up person, even though you see all this happening in the world and you're willing to talk about it and suss it out. Where did you get your positiveness? More from the way your parents raised you or on your own?
Definitely from my parents.
Wow.
Totally from my parents.
Yeah.
Very briefly, My mother was born of Japanese immigrants, the last of 8 children. We published, I worked up and we published her memoir last year from Oregon State University Press. I meant to have it here so I could flash it, but it's called From Thorns to Blossoms. Because she was raised in a kind of traditional Japanese rural farm style in Hood River, Oregon, where she was born. And then during the war, she was carted off to the prison camps and spent 3 years of the Second World War behind barbed wire while her older brothers were serving in the U.S. Army in the Pacific. And she's always been very sociable and talkative. She reaches out. I mean, it didn't close her down, that experience. She's always been outgoing.
Wow.
My dad was a little less verbal, much more of an introvert. He was a musician, as I said, but he liked the fact that my mom, sometimes the damper in the couple tends to bring the other one down. I don't think that happened quite so much with my parents.
Yeah.
My dad kind of accepted my mom's efforts to connect them to the community, to get involved, to have people stay with us and dine over all the time. And the first time I took my future wife to meet my parents, she had actually resisted. My wife is considerably older than I. She had already had 2 husbands, neither of them short marriages. And we started dating, and she was sure it was not going to last. She was having a good time, but we weren't going to work out. And my mother had self-published her first version of her memoir back in 1990. And my girlfriend read it, so she knew a lot more about me and my family than you normally know about somebody you're just starting to see. And she felt like she was going to like my parents if she met them, and she didn't want to meet them because she knew she'd have to give them up. So it took from February of 91 to November for me to drag her down to meet my parents. And in the course of meeting my parents, she loved them both, of course. Any girl who meets my parents is dead meat. She had a conversation with my dad, and she had been raised Catholic, had fallen away from the church, and was moving in a direction that would eventuate in my wife becoming a Jew. But she was in the middle passage between those. And so she had a conversation with my dad, newly met. She said, "Don, why do you think we're here? What's the point of it all?" And my dad said, "To have fun." And my wife, and I'm sure Kurt Vonnegut, and there's somebody else who said something very much like this. We're here to fart around. My wife's initial reaction was, "Oh my God, how superficial, how naive, because she'd been raised Catholic and she was moving toward Judaism. But she studied my dad and saw that his idea of having fun was socializing, connecting with people, doing volunteer music teaching in the schools, working with volunteer fire department, being involved." And and I don't remember either of my parents saying anything like this to me, but they kind of imbued it by example.
Yeah.
So that I've lived my life that way too.
Yeah.
And how I've parsed it since hearing this story from Carol is that it's not just that you look for things you'll enjoy, but you look for ways to have fun and enjoy the things that you have to do as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, I'm 66. I just got laid off a marvelous job that I held for 20 months. And so I'm job hunting again. I'm not ready to retire. I am not prepared to retire. So I'm job hunting, but I've already done a lot of the things that many people I know and observe have waited until retirement in order to get to do. I've acted on stage. I've acted in independent film. I've done commercial modeling and print modeling and commercial video work. I've read I've read literature aloud in libraries and bookstores and even banks and on the street. I've done voice acting. I do characters for a couple of science fiction podcasts right now. And as I mentioned, I'm about to do a production of Twelfth Night, Shakespeare in the Parks in July, which is why I look this way. I'm trying to grow everything out to see what I can work with. It'll get shaped and trimmed back eventually. I've published 4 books. I've tinkered with, I was a daily newspaper reporter for 3+ years. I belonged to 3 book discussion groups for several years. Now it's down to 2. So I only meet with 2 book discussion groups a month now. One of them has been going for 23 years.
Nice.
And that accounts for 35, 40 books a year. But I usually read more than 100, some typically between 110 and 150 or more books a year myself, because I love to read. And these are all things that I hear people say, now that I'm retired, I can do this. I was like,
Yeah.
why the hell not do it along the way?
Right,
I
exactly.
had a lot more energy and I was more limber.
You got a lot from great parents, David, but you really took it farther. It's beautiful. Did they raise you a particular religion?
No. Well, no. They took me to Unitarian Fellowship and Unitarian Church, which, on the West Coast, the Unitarian Church is like a third atheist, a third agnostic, and a third deist,
Right.
and mostly social activist. But if I'd said, I don't want to go, I'm sure my parents would say, okay, fine. I mean, once I was 8 or 9 years old and could basically look after myself at home, probably even earlier. I played alone, not only in the house, but outdoors and around the neighborhood alone. God, as early as 5, possibly even younger. My parents gave me a lot of free rein, physically as well as intellectually. I had a cousin who dined with us, who came over and dined with us at our dinner table when I was in high school. And my dad, we were having a discussion. My dad turned to her and said, well, what do you think? And she was like, nobody ever asked her that in her whole house.
Yeah. Do you pray, David?
No.
If
Not-
God,
not in any sense beyond, oh God, I hope nothing happens, or I hope this happens. It's not serious. It's just, that's an emotion.
No. One lady, I says, do you pray? She goes, yeah, for parking spaces. But if God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
You did a good job, son. With the tools I gave you.
Yeah. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Well, I don't think evil exists as a separate entity. Evil is something that we create as a value. Again, it's like saying science is storytelling. Evil doesn't exist unless we define and value and value it as such. So I can't say evil works through people. And I kind of go back and forth as to whether evil people exist. Because especially as an actor, I'm aware of the fact that really ugly and awful and evil people don't think of themselves that way. You have to, I don't get to play villains too often. To my chagrin, I usually get cast as honest, dependable, doctors, lawyers in my commercial work. In Shakespeare, I've done Benvolio in Romeo and Juliet, Duke of Albany and King Lear, who gets to survive and delivers the final words of the play, but he's kind of, they're all kind of nice and boring. I was Rosalind's father, Duke Sr., and As You Like It. They're all great guys, but they're not fun to play, not quite as much as, at last I got cast as a comic villain, at least for Twelfth Night. I'm going to have fun being Malvolio.
All right.
His final line is, I'll be revenged on the whole pack of you, which there are many different ways to deliver that. I'm going to ask the director for his permission to deliver it a different way every performance, because you can roar or you can present it as a pathetic squeak. There are any number of ways to do that, because it doesn't really matter what happens afterwards. Olivia sends a servant to look after him, but nothing anybody else does really depends on how he delivers that line.
Wow. Well, really the hidden question is, you handled that well, was how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurai: keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Mm-hmm.
JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. But I'm curious specifically, before you answer the question, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? How would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, you definitely, I mean, that was part of what Marilyn Waring was saying about Phyllis Schlafly. If you get all worked up and think you got to fight, you're automatically giving the other person power.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily deserve. So, what was the first step in this interaction?
How do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? Like your friend says, I'm being bullied.
The first thing you need to assess is, do you need this enemy? Are you dependent on this person's existence in any way? Because if your enemy is your boss, yeah, you got to deal with it. If your enemy is a coworker, to some extent, you've got to deal with it. I've been in that situation. But a lot of us go out looking for enemies, or we see somebody doing something we disapprove of and we feel we got to act. So the very first question you got to ask yourself is, am I denoting this person as an enemy out of my own needs? And really, does this person deserve any of my attention, or can I just go my merry way? Now,
really good.
If this is an unavoidable enemy, like your boss or coworker or something, there are certainly there are going to be specific things to deal with them depending on the situation. But I think the general things you can say is, A, take care of yourself.
Wow.
Watch your ass. Don't let them get to you any more than is absolutely unavoidable.
Yes.
You know, that term self-care. Don't let them work up your stress and anxiety levels beyond a level that's warranted in order to stay alert and watch out for whatever they've got in mind for you, or whatever they might do to you carelessly because they don't give a shit about your needs or values. And then ask me the question again. I'm sure more answer will appear to me.
Yeah, it's how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? You're doing it well. Yeah. You're saying the first thing is, do I need this enemy?
They deserve to be an enemy.
Yeah, if you need it, then you got to take care of yourself. But it's like this will help you jump off further, deeper. There's two. American Indians, indigenous, say your enemy's your best teacher. And Walt Whitman is almost contrary to what you said. He says, I no doubt deserve my enemies.
and both are true. Both are true.
Yeah.
Enemies, as I said, when I go out of my way to get involved in firefights, even if they're a total brick wall that doesn't respond to my reason and my logic and or even my questions to them about what they believe or think, they teach me more about, where are my blind spots? What am I not seeing here? Where do I need to do more homework? What do I take for granted that may not be actually warranted by the facts? Give me the Whitman again, the other side.
Whitman is, I no doubt deserve my enemies.
Yeah. Well, to some extent, yes, also. As I said, both are true. And the way I would parse Whitman is to say, if you're doing your best, your, shall we say, moral obligation to be and please yourself, you're going to piss off other people. Inevitably, you will. Yeah. There will be personal relationships that will be stressed. People who don't understand what you're doing and are going to get worked up about it, especially family.
Yeah.
And there'll be strangers who disagree with you, who feel they need to suppress the message you're putting out. And so you not only deserve the enemies you get, but you're not doing your job if you don't have enemies.
God, I never suss this question out deeper because I have two more quotes, but I gotta say them. I used to say this one all the time, and I just realized I don't. Chinese proverb: "He who cannot agree with their enemy is controlled by them."
Oh
And,
yeah.
and that is your mantra is, yeah, use it as a learning experience, suss out, you know,
Even if the actual content is misleading, false, uh, the emotions that draw them to it are definitely something you probably can relate to. And
yeah.
that's a learning experience in itself.
That's it. Feel like why? Oh, my friend taught me this. Why do you need to say that? And that's like put that in their court. But here's because you got great humor sensibility, David. Levi Strauss: "Cannibals boil their friends and roast their enemies."
Wow.
So, roast is this thing, what do? You get up there and make fun of your friends, or you make fun of your enemies,
Mhm.
you roast them.
Well, it's easy to roast enemies. It's easy to make fun of enemies.
Yeah.
You can make fun of friends if there's enough of understanding of your common ground and
Yeah.
they'll get it. I mean, this is the underlying factor of that line that women say they love a man because he makes me laugh. Now, there are lots of men who make fun of their partner in a guy kind of way that is not respectful, that does not
Right.
understand what their partner finds funny and make the woman the butt of their jokes, and that is not acceptable. So
Yeah.
when a woman says he makes me laugh, it's the equivalent of saying he understands me, therefore he loves me in a way.
Yeah. That's
So, but as I said, it's easy to roast your and make fun of your enemies.
yeah.
Looking at friends, boy, your friends, that's a lot harder if you see a friend doing something that is that A, you don't approve of, B, you don't like,
Yeah.
C, you don't think is in their best interests. It's one of the toughest things in the world to make that choice between do I speak up or do I let them go? There's a
Yeah.
marvelous quote in Ingmar Bergman's Smiles of a Summer Night. There's a
Yeah.
dowager who only appears in the bed, and she has this great line that, at least in the version I saw, was translated: "One can never prevent the people one loves from making the mistakes they have to, and that's what makes one so tired."
Yeah.
I've always loved that line.
That is good. We just went through a Bergman phase. That's good. He amazing writing. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. And you also really evoked my dad had a sense of humor, and he would say my mom bossed things around, and he'd go, "I'm on probation," like joking, like I'm on probation. And at the end of their lives, she'd go, "Quit using that line." She just got fed up. He like that. I don't deal with that humor anymore.
You run out of time, bro.
But here's Watt Kelly, his pogo character spoof. "We have met the enemy and
Yeah.
he is us."
I quoted that a number of times.
Yeah. Well, that leads perfectly. And Nassim Taleb said, "Games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is." My friend says, "Well, villains don't think they're bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom." And then Gregory Bateson says, "When the criminal gets caught, does he go, 'Whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day'? Or does he go, 'Oh, I did something morally and socially wrong'?" So again, it's a lot of prompts, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
Wow, I could spend a fair amount of time on each one of those. What were 4 or 5 quotes?
Yeah,
That's
you
really a
can
lot.
you can go through them all. I mean,
They're
the
all
first one,
interesting and
no,
provocative, but
no, no,
but
Nassim,
but
take
go to
take
the heart
on,
question. Focus on the heart question. Give that to me again. Does
yeah.
punishment work?
Does punishment work? But see, one guy said, caught me. He goes, those quotes don't apply to your question, dude. But it's basically, the Nassim Taleb is the interesting one, I think, really, because the Bateson works with this punishment work. I mean, most people go, no, punishment doesn't work. And then some people go, I hope so. But Nassim Taleb, I think you being a storyteller in someone so deep in this, games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't.
That has a very strong negative aspect to it. So
right, but the rest of it is, but in real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. So anywhere you want to go with any of this, yeah.
Well, I would even argue against that final proposition that we can tell who a hero is.
Yeah. Can we? Yeah, we can't. Not necessarily. Yeah.
There are plenty of heroes who turned out to have pretty clay feet.
Yeah.
Or who badly used the people around them to get where they were in order to do the great thing that they did that we all admire them for. But I want to focus on what I heard as a really negative aspect of games.
Yeah.
Because so many games frame a situation in a nice, clean, simple, coherent fashion that leaves out a lot of the nuance and the big picture, which is not only interesting and fascinating, but sometimes crucial to understanding the situation.
Yeah.
And I've been repeatedly upset by what I've perceived as, people complain about the division in this country, and then they continue to participate in it.
Yeah.
And I think part of the division is this encouragement, which, again, I'm going to pull back to that corporate consumer thing of selling you things you don't need by playing on your insecurities and anxieties by setting up these games, which make you feel like someone won, someone lost, I'm with the winner, whether it's the incumbent president or the Dallas Cowboys or a particular basketball game. Everybody, I get irritated even when the local symphony is introduced as your blank symphony, your Oregon Symphony, your Oregon Zoo. It's not mine. I don't own it. I didn't invest in it. It's its own thing, and I appreciate what it does. I love what it does, but it's not mine. That's marketing bullshit. I really makes me itch when I hear that.
You are smart. It's marketing bullshit. It is. Yeah.
Let things be what they are, and I'll develop my relationship with them as I want to.
Yeah.
God, there's so many other things in that series of quotes you gave me, but I want to
let me jump just on that one for a second, David. When people, because I make films, and like, you go to a film screening and they introduce the filmmaker, and the filmmaker goes, I hope you enjoy my film. I'm like, don't tell me how to take your film. I know it's the common thing to say, but I hope my film doesn't like Billy Wilder nailed it. He says, I just hope they like my film as much as they like the popcorn. So it's like, don't tell me how to feel, but it's the accepted way to introduce every film. So it's like, I hope you enjoy the play tonight,
Well, most people, and I will include us, most of us speak in cliches. We pick up the tool that's readily available, and we say something. Even if we stop to think about it, we'd realize, that's not really how I feel.
Yeah.
Or that's not really how I see it. But A, it's easy. And B, it says, I belong to this particular event, this gathering.
Yeah.
I'm speaking your language. And, like me and the cat, no, I'd rather worry. No, I'd rather say, I stick out. I object. I don't agree. I'm with you on this. But I don't necessarily see it the way you're describing it.
That's why Marshall wrote a great book called From Cliche to Archetype, because then it becomes an archetype. And then we all think, oh, why didn't you tell me you wanted me to enjoy your film? I hope you hate my film, You're not going to say that.
Things I never say. I never say fine when someone
Yeah.
asks, how are you doing?
Oh, good.
Mm,
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I say okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes I say I'm surviving. Sometimes,
Yeah.
and it's a nature relation. It depends
Yeah.
on who's asking. If it's someone who I
Yeah.
think would actually be interested and could take the news, I'll say not so good today, or I'm
Yeah.
having a hard time, or
Yeah.
I'm kind of preoccupied with, you know. But fine, it's just like saying move on. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It's
Right. But
it,
with that, it's the honest.
it's what I got this from the Canadian novelist Robertson Davies. He talked about phatic communication,
Oh my God.
Phatic, phatic communication, which happens a lot more in cultures on the other side of the globe, where there is this whole series of pro forma things that you say about each other's family, about God, about your business, whatever, before you get down to really discussing what matters. And
Dude, I've studied phatic communication for years, but I have to go back. You said you got it from the Canadian who?
novelist Robertson Davies, it was specifically in his 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 tongue-in-cheek columns, the something or other of Samuel Marchbanks. That's where he talked about it, and that's where
What year? What year about?
Probably originally written in the 60s or 70s, but I read probably a collection that came out later.
I'm going to send you some information on my research on the word phatic, because that is amazing. Because there was another, you might know the Church of the Subgenius, Bob Dobbs.
Oh yeah.
There's a Canadian Bob Dobbs, and his book is called Phatic Communication with Bob Dobbs. But he got it from Hayakawa. Well, it's sort of traced to Hayakawa, that Asian politician in California.
Yeah.
But he Hayakawa got it from this other guy. If you go to etymology, you'll see where
Hayakawa, I think, was originally a linguist anyway.
he's a linguist first, yeah, and then it is like it's it's casual communication. It's like you go up to a guy and he's got a flat tire. This is how I describe it. Guy's got a flat tire in his car, and you go up to him and go, "Got a flat?" And he goes, "Yeah." He doesn't go, You can say it's flat. You don't have to say it. It's casual conversation. It's Reagan. It's
It's an
Reagan.
opener to establish
Yeah.
relationship. However,
Water cooler. It's the other one is water cooler talk.
yeah.
Yeah. But again, I'm curious your thing, does punishment work? Because I think
Yeah,
debates,
I did want to get to that. And
but I don't mean to distract you. If you were still going somewhere,
I've
that
already forgotten what the other steps were, and I did want to talk about this because my reaction is of course and no.
yeah.
Sometimes
Well,
it does, sometimes it doesn't.
yeah.
If you But if you put it in terms of, does a regimen of punishment work from the point of view of the person who wants to impose it, so whether it's
Yeah.
a society or an individual, the answer is going to tend more to be no, because when it works because of a response from the subject of the
Yeah.
treatment. The
Yeah.
person who is being punished has to, yeah, I mean, it's like what they say about any kind of analyse. The patient improves, a person who's in counseling improves because they're motivated to, not because the psychiatrist or psychologist is so tremendously
Yeah.
talented and effective.
Yeah.
The light bulb has to want to change.
Yeah. Well, this is David, it's so fun because I didn't want to even bring up this person's name, but I used to ask this before he got back in office. And I'm curious because it goes along with this enemy punishment. If Trump doesn't get elected, so we're time traveling back, if
Mhm.
he does not get reelected, he gets thrown in jail, he writes a book and says, "I'm sorry, would you forgive him?"
I don't know about that. because it's his lies have gone on for so long, it's tough to
Yeah.
believe anything he says.
Yeah.
B, I'd have certainly want to know what is he hoping to get out of this, either the admission or
Yeah.
my forgiveness, whatever that
Yeah.
might matter. Say everybody's forgiveness. I've read a lot of books about him, his earlier life as well as his first administration. My wife and I actually read them aloud to each other. We read aloud to each other over dinner, everything from Harry Potter to mystery novels
Yeah.
to to selected nonfiction. And we read a lot of Trump because we just don't fricking understand him.
Yeah.
But there's also a part of me that says it doesn't even matter whether
Yeah.
I forgive him. It doesn't matter to me. It's not going to do anything for me. It doesn't matter to him. He doesn't give a shit about who I am or whether I
Yeah.
forgive him. And so, it's just strictly a matter of whim. It's not a pressing moral question or even
Yeah. No, back when I was asking it pre-election, most people go, I wouldn't believe him because he lies so much. And he never goes, I made a mistake. But this is the follow-up is the quote by Mark Twain. Forgiveness is the smell the flower gives off when the foot steps on it. So, I mean, just in discussing evil people, evil actions, punishment working, what is the role of forgiveness in your opinion? Is that like, is I don't know how to ask this question, but you sort of would see where I'm going.
I have some responses.
Yeah.
First, as I said, my wife became a Jew in 1997 on the first year anniversary of my father's death at the hands of a drunk driver. She chose that date to give it a positive spin
Yeah.
and also to acknowledge how much she loved my father. And Judaism is, in a sense, harsher and more intellectual, much of it, theologically, than Christianity. It says you must act to do the right thing, but you don't necessarily have to forgive. If someone asks for your help or just needs your help, you do it. You don't have to feel good about it. You don't have to say, this makes up for what was done to you or what you've done or whatever. You have this present need and I'm answering the need. I am not making necessarily a judgment either way on your actions. So my sense of Judaism, again, I'm a congenital atheist. Since I go to temple with my wife, accompany her, I know a lot of the prayers, and so I'll chant with her. I always say the mourner's Kaddish for my dad, but I'm not a Jew. I've been a lifelong atheist, so I refer to myself now as a non-practicing atheist.
Yeah.
And my feeling is that forgiveness is a lot more about the forgiver. Often it's just to make them feel better about themselves, to live up to a standard that they hold themselves to or want to see themselves in. In the most unpleasant sense, I would say it is self-aggrandizement. It is an act of vanity to forgive, because it's entirely possible for me to accept that there are some acts that are unforgivable. There are lots of things that people want to rush to forgive when they have no investment in it. They weren't involved. They weren't harmed. What the fuck are you butting your nose into it for? And so with regard to this hypothetical book, I couldn't begin to consider, quote, forgiving the author until I saw a very detailed and systematic discussion on his part that he understands all these different things that he did. And I don't think he's capable of that. I wouldn't expect him to get anywhere near that. He doesn't understand. I mean, he doesn't understand the forces that made him what he is, which is what I'm busily trying to do all the time, and what I think most decent human beings should be doing. but he doesn't even understand basic tenets of U.S. law and the Constitution.
Yeah.
Most of Americans could beat him hands down in an 8th grade history or civics exam. And
Yeah.
that is unworthy of the office.
Yeah. Yeah, most of us are in shock that this happened, and we got to hang in there and be positive and do something and think and stay positive
And take care of each other.
and take care of it. Like you said, self-care. Yeah. You can't just surrender it, because when most progressive liberals like, well, let's just let them collapse. It's like, no, just don't let them. There's more to it. You know.
I had a friend who called me out just yesterday, a guy I'd been in several theatrical productions with, hadn't seen him in a long time. He's a bit older. He protested actively against the Vietnam War, and he basically writes off anybody who is not only supported Trump, but is just a conservative. And he says,
Yeah.
you know, they're stupid and
Yeah.
they're total loss. I said, you cannot do that. We
Yeah.
cannot save this country without at least some of them. And they're
Yeah.
not all, not because just because they're not leftist doesn't mean they're conservatives and stupid. There are a lot of bewildered and confused
Yeah.
and frightened people in between who didn't vote for either side and who
Exactly.
are at a loss, and we got to give them support and bring them in and help them understand what's going on and how to fight it.
You're right. Yeah, it is like we're humans. We can't divide and conquer. We've got to stick together. I'm going to send you my current essay. It's called Name Calling All Idiots. And it's just that. Name calling doesn't work. Well, it could work and alleviate you of some stress. But in the long run, let's work together to move the project forward. So I asked for 90 minutes, David, and we're at 90. I want to do a part 2. I hope you'll agree, because we only did 12 questions, and I want to get into writing, acting, and I want to get into politics with you and political activists, because you are
Not to mention some of my great war stories, interviewing Ken Kesey and meeting Steve Prefontaine and beating one of his early records on the track. And
oh yeah, no, well, you know, Ray Bradbury wrote his books 5 blocks down the street from my house, here in Venice, California. Harlan Ellison, my wife's a pro jazz singer. Her partner did an album with Harlan Ellison. So there's tons we can talk about.
I've got photos of me with Harlan. I did some work for Harlan. He actually called me friend, even though that was really elevating my status. But at least we knew each other somewhat, and he seemed to respect a few things about me.
Now, this has been so exciting, and I've learned so much, and you're really generous. But why don't we close out this part 1, David, with this one? Hollis Frampton's experimental filmmaker, he says, narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. You kind of touched on this a little earlier. My question is, can you forget to die?
Wow, there are again half a dozen facets to that I'd love to address.
Go for it.
I can
I'm
remember.
in no hurry. I'm in no hurry. Go for it.
The initial section where he talks about storytelling relates to what I said earlier about we don't think until we feel. We cannot help but feel, and thought is how we shape and respond to and choose action based on what we feel. So yeah, that initial phrase or two, I totally agree with him. I did admit earlier that I was terrified of dying. I've written about it a number of times, and angry and frustrated, and had harbored a lot of fear, had a lot of not full on physical panic attacks, but something close to it for the first 30, 40 years of my life. I've mellowed a bit, I think. But I think I mentioned that acting helps me escape that fear of mortality, however briefly, by being somebody else and being so focused on being somebody else that I'm no longer me. But at the same time, I agree with all the artists and writers who said you have to be aware and acknowledge that you will not be here much longer and you will be gone completely. We're not buying any of those escape hatches that humans have come up with over the years, whether it's heaven or reincarnation or any of that. No, I understand that cannot be proven. So I say intellectually, I'm agnostic. Emotionally, I am an atheist. At the same time, I think it is useful and helpful and even advisable to forget that you're mortal temporarily, whether it's through acting, whether it's through totally being focused on another person that you're trying to help or that you're in love with or that even you're driven by lust to spend time with, because all of these things help us grow and help us to understand ourselves and become a greater person, certainly if we stay alert and evaluate what we've been up to and what we've been through. And it's okay. I had a girlfriend in my late 20s, early 30s who said that a counselor once told her sometimes recreational drugs are a rational response to the situation you're in. Uh, that's not something that I've dabbled in very much. I would say I would be happy to try cocaine. I would be happy to try heroin. I would be happy to try anything because I have a pretty solid sense of self. The problem is getting pure, unadulterated stuff that's not too powerful and is not mixed with other shit. I've done
Right.
I've done acid a couple times. I've done mushrooms a couple times. They were largely positive experiences. Not something I want to. And I love bourbon. We are temporarily out of bourbon, and that's been in the back of my mind for the couple of weeks that's been the case. We haven't bought any beer. We haven't stocked any beer. We usually have a little bit of wine, a couple of nights a week. But again, I find I'm wanting a lot less. I don't
Yeah.
particularly enjoy the getting the high or the hangover the next day,
Yeah.
which happens with many of them. And I kind of like just being myself. But can we forget to die or ought we forget that we're
Yeah.
mortal?
Really, really good question. Can you forget to die?
I found that I can sometimes,
Yeah.
and that it's not such a bad thing after all to do it temporarily, not permanently, not grab in onto one of those hopeful escape hatches that in my judgment, a lot of people do. But have you read Julian Barnes's death memoir, Nothing to Be Frightened of?
No, I'll check into it.
I
Tell
wrote a
me.
very, very detailed and very personal response to it on a website, and I'll send you the link if I remember to, in which
And Julian Barnes.
the English
Yeah.
novelist who I think he won the Booker Prize for shit, I've forgotten the one that won for it. His first famous one was Flaubert's Parrot, and he wrote Arthur and George about an incident late in Arthur Conan Doyle's life when he went to bat for a wrongly accused, I think, Indian doctor.
Yeah.
Um, but it was about 10 or 12, maybe more years than that. He wrote what he called a death memoir, in which he talked about his own feelings about death throughout his life, compared them against his very dry Aristotelian philosopher older brother, as well as watching members of his family die and what that experience was like, and then comparing notes with a lot of other famous thanatophobes, which he quotes, writers and painters and filmmakers and artists who had opinions on this. Shostakovich, he quotes a number of times too. Fascinating book. I prevailed upon my book group to read it, and the discussion didn't quite measure up to what I was hoping to. People didn't really put their ass on the line, their heart on the line about it. So I did. I did the best I could to do so. But the conclusion of my long essay about Barnes's book is that I have a slight disagreement with him about the value of acknowledging your inevitable mortality all the time. because he kind
Right.
of says that. And I say, you cannot really fully experience life unless you forget about it occasionally. You cannot be alert to what's happening to yourself. You cannot be in the moment if
Yeah.
you're constantly thinking about how it's going to get taken away from you someday.
Yeah. That's David. That's James Joyce Finnegan's Wake is what we study a lot, and that's where McLuhan learned everything he knows. And he has a line in it that goes, "Remember to forget."
Yeah.
And that's an amazing thing, because when I ask the question, "Can you forget to die?" most people, they're not sure. Are you asking me that metaphorically or literally? And I'm like, you put it in the context you want, and you did. You put it in the full context, because of people say, no, I can forget to die. And then the next guy goes, no, you can't. You know you're going to die. But he says, someone wants to say, I can forget to die. I know I'm going to die. And Paul Krasner has a great line. I only believe in reincarnation in one of my past lives.
Well, my reaction would be, how is it possible to forget it metaphorically? I don't see how it's possible to discuss it anyway, but literally.
Literally, yeah. But you did say I can, and you're discussing it literally. So that's why you're like, no, David, you're going to die. Because, we don't know what's going to happen to us after we die. We want to know, we want to think we do, because we go into the earth and, you're gone. But,
And that also connects in a way to your question about what would I want God to say to me if I met
right.
him? Because a kind of related question philosophically is, how would you lead your life differently if you believed in God, to me,
Yeah.
or to the believer? They seem to think that anybody would lead their lives very differently if there was no God. It's like, if there's no God, then this would happen and this would happen. Really? Would you really go out and rape and murder people and break into stores? I know I don't, and I don't see how God's existence makes any difference to me in that, because there are a lot of other factors in play here. There are a lot of other things that are going to affect you. And my answer to your last question was simply trying to stay alert and to the nuances that it's not, almost nothing can be answered simply, plainly, comfortingly, securely. And so when I go on and try to pick apart and analyze these stupid arguments or these stupid memes that conservatives and libertarians post, there comes a point where almost everyone starts to make excuses to get out of it, because there's either an attack on me or an excuse for themselves, which is the same thing, which is either, oh, I got better things to do. Oh, you're taking this far too seriously. Don't you have a job? You obviously don't have work. It's like, sorry, I type 80 words per minute just because I can write almost closer to as fast as I can think, and I think pretty hard. That doesn't mean that doesn't give you an excuse not to pay attention to what I'm saying and try to respond like a rational, thinking, moral human being.
Yeah.
And, I don't really hit them that hard, and explicit with that, but that's the underlying message: is you're not listening to me, and you are not going to learn anything unless you listen to and acknowledge what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You are proving my underlying assumption that you don't want to learn anything. All you want is to voice your opinions, hear other people say, yeah, man, right on, and leave. You don't want to have to defend it. You don't want to have to justify it. You don't want to have to document it. Oh my God, that's work. Thinking is work. Thinking is do it. A lot of people don't seem to.
Yeah, that's several things. The Marx Brothers were in a jam, and one of them says, we got to think, and the other one said, we already tried that. And I have a bunch of things. George Clinton says, think, it ain't illegal yet. But that's what's really inspired me with our time together is your mantra of listen and be alert, and know that's my thing is there's nuances. There's a deeper level here. Let's go deep sea diving. And when I ask people, what would you want God to say to you after you die? They usually go, you did a good job. And I says, okay, that's fine. But, I want people to be creative too. And one guy goes, God goes like, well, I checked. We made a mistake. You're going back. I thought that was a pretty creative. And I always say, what would I want God to tell me? Who killed Kennedy, dude? Let me know. Come on.
I came up with the first thing that popped into my mind, but I could come up with a lot more like
right.
tongue-in-cheek responses like, wow, that was really interesting what you did with the tools I gave you.
But it is interesting because, Harold Bloom says it so well. He said, do you believe in God? And he goes, no, my wife believes in God and I don't believe in him, but he's built into our language.
Yeah.
And so that's what he's talking about, how it's built into our language.
Yeah.
So that's what,
I'm not a Christian. I've never been a Christian.
Yeah.
But I find metaphorically that a lot of the processes or the descriptions of reality in the Bible and in Christianity are useful to help understand what one is feeling as well as how one should respond to situations. And you asked me about prayer. There's a sense in which I do pray in the sense of it's paying attention.
Yeah.
Prayer is a moment where you stop and you say, what matters to me now? What should I do? And, some people take the tack of asking for help, saying, tell me what to do.
Yeah.
But it's the same general sort of feeling of where am I? What should I do now?
Yeah.
And that's a way of being alert, being in the moment of being your most human.
Yeah. It's like Ram Dass taught us, be here now. And Wyndham Lewis, just to repeat it, we can live in the present and write a detailed history of the future because all times are happening now. This is what I learned from Zappa and James Joyce. It's called all at onceness. All times are happening now. So, David, I can't wait for part 2. I hope we can plan it down the road. And go ahead.
One question out of curiosity. You said we covered 12 or maybe 13 with the last one. Out of how many? How much more do we have to work with?
What a good question. That's I'll revert to John Cage, who said, that's a very good question. I wouldn't want to ruin it with an answer. No, I have about 150 questions.
Oh,
I don't ask them all. Most in 40 years of interviewing 1,000 people, most of it is about 30 questions, about 30 or 40. And then over the last year, I've been doing these. Well, let's do a part 2 because I don't want to cut you off. But when I start having this format of 90 minutes, because that's what an audio cassette was back in the days, I go, well, why not fill the whole thing? And, I there's these people who go, well, I can't do it on audio or video. I'll only type them out. So I go, okay, I'll send you all 150 questions. You can do one really important filmmaker said, I'll do one out of the 100, and I don't care how many you pick if you're going to type them. But the beauty of Zoom in this medium that we are in is that we can see each other, and we're probably more attentive than if you came to Venice or I came up to Coos Bay, because our eyes would be wandering in the room, and we're like forced to be more attentive in the Zoom situation. So I've had so much fun doing these interviews because I do find people, more attentive and more present. But, it is like, it's just casual. I can tell if we do part 2 and you're like, dude, I'd be willing to do a part 3. Great, we'll do a part 3. but some of these people, David, I'll tell you the truth. I've had these great ones, and I'll go, oh, let's do a part 2. And they go, yeah, let's do it. They won't book part 2. And then I don't know how much I should bug them. But maybe down the road, a year or two, I might go, hey, you want to do it now? Because people are too busy. They're like, I got a life to live here. So I'm just like, and some people are like, yeah, I'll book it. That's fine. I'm casual about it. But I got to thank you because it's been a delight and I've learned a lot. And that's what I am most grateful for. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I feel exactly the same. And if we book part 2 tomorrow, I'd be ready.
It will be probably 3-4 months down the line, but I'm going to hit the end. I don't want to do this, but I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now. But I do hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever. Thank you so much, David.
Uh-huh.
Bye. I love you, man. That was fun.